On a rainy Tuesday in Queens, New York, a decision was made that would ripple through two lives on opposite ends of existence. It wasn't made in a boardroom or on a trading floor. It was made in the tired mind of a 17-year-old girl holding a mop. She had just found a suitcase left behind by a man in a $1,000 suit. Inside that suitcase wasn't just clothes or documents. It was a choice, a life-altering choice, wrapped in stacks of $100 bills totaling $100,000. This is the story of what happens when profound integrity collides with unimaginable power, and a single act of honesty uncovers a secret far more valuable than money. The golden spoon. Dinah smelled of old coffee, frying onions, and the damp wool of rain-soaked coats. For 17-year-old Maya Rodriguez, it was the smell of survival. It was the scent of the overdue rent notice tucked inside her mother's purse, and the faint, wheezing sound her little brother, Leo, made when he slept. Each scent was a reminder of why she was on her feet for an 8-hour shift after a full day of school, her worn-out Skechers squeaking on the linoleum. Tuesday was always the worst, a dead-end day, caught between the memory of the weekend and the distant promise of Friday. The rain didn't help, lashing against the plate glass windows and turning the neon open sign into a blurry pink halo. The diner was mostly empty, save for 2 truckers nursing lukewarm coffee and a regular Mrs. Gable, slowly working her way through a slice of apple pie. Then the bell above the door chimed, a sharp, dissonant sound against the rhythm of the rain. The man who entered didn't belong. He was a creature from a different ecosystem, a shark in a goldfish pond. His suit was a deep charcoal grey, a Brioni by the look of the cut. So perfectly tailored it seemed moulded to his frame. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and on his wrist a Patek Philippe watch gleamed subtly under the fluorescent lights. He was maybe 50, with sharp, intelligent eyes, a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite, and a faint, preoccupied scowl etched between his brows. He moved with an impatient energy that made the small diner feel even smaller. He didn't take a menu. He slid into the booth by the window. Booth 4, Maya's least favorite because the vinyl was split, and dropped a handsome, dark brown leather suitcase onto the seat beside him. He didn't even look at her as she approached with a water glass and a laminated menu. "Coffee." "Black," he said, his voice a low baritone that commanded attention. He was already tapping at his phone, a sleek, unforgiving slab of glass and metal. Maya nodded, her "Welcome to the golden spoon" dying on her lips. She poured his coffee, her hand steady, despite the man's unnerving presence. He was Harrison Sterling. She didn't know his name then, but she knew his type. She'd seen them on the news, striding out of black cars, surrounded by cameras, the titans of industry, the kings of Manhattan. What on earth was one of them doing in a greasy spoon in Queens? He drank the coffee in 3 large gulps, paid with a crisp $50 bill he pulled from a slim money clip, and told her to keep the change, without making eye contact. The tip was more than she'd made all afternoon. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he was gone, pushing the door open and disappearing into the rain-swept street where a black Lincoln Navigator was waiting, its engine humming silently. Maya cleared the cup, her mind already on the mountain of homework waiting for her. It wasn't until she went to wipe down the table that she saw it. Sitting innocently on the red vinyl seat, half hidden in the shadow, was the brown leather suitcase. For a moment, she just stared. It was so out of place, like a diamond sitting in a bowl of oatmeal. Her first thought was that he'd be back any second. She moved it behind the counter, placing it near the lost and found box, a sad little cardboard container with a mismatched glove and a pair of reading glasses. The suitcase dwarfed it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Sal, the diner's owner, A burly man with a kind heart and a permanent scowl came out from the kitchen. "What's that?" he grunted, nodding at the case. "The guy in the suit, from booth 4. He forgot it," Maya said. "He'll be back," Sal said, wiping his hands on his apron. "A guy like that doesn't lose something that expensive for long." But an hour later, as Maya was getting ready to clock out, the suitcase was still there. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the diner was empty again. Curiosity, a powerful and dangerous thing, began to gnaw at her. It wasn't just a briefcase. It was solid, heavy. "You're not leaving that here overnight," Sal stated, locking the register. "Take it with you. He'll probably call in the morning." "What if he doesn't?" Maya asked, her voice small. Sal shrugged. "Then it's your problem. I'm not responsible for it." Carrying the suitcase home on the bus felt illicit. It was heavy, the handle smooth and cool in her hand. It felt like it was worth more than everything she owned combined. When she got to her apartment building, the familiar smell of boiled cabbage and disinfectant filled the hallway. She could hear Leo's video game noises from behind their door, a series of cheerful beeps and boops that stood in stark contrast to the anxiety coiling in her stomach. Inside, her mother, Maria, was asleep on the couch, still in her nurse's aide uniform, an open textbook on her chest. She was studying to become a registered nurse, a dream that seemed to recede with every new medical bill for Leo. Maya slipped into her room, a small space she shared with her brother, separated by a flimsy curtain. Leo was on his floor bed, focused on his handheld game. He looked up and smiled, but the smile was followed by a soft, shallow cough. "What's that?" he asked, eyeing the suitcase. "Just something from work," Maya whispered. She waited until he was asleep, until the only sounds were the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren. She placed the suitcase on her bed. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. It felt wrong, like she was violating a sacred trust. But the curiosity was overwhelming. What could be so important that a man like that would carry it around in a suitcase? There were 2 gold latches on the front. No lock. Her fingers trembled as she reached for them. She hesitated, her mother's voice echoing in her head. "Honesty, Mija. It's all we have that no one can take from us." But what did honesty pay for? Did it pay for the new, expensive inhaler Leo needed? Did it pay for the specialist her mother wanted him to see at Mount Sinai? Did it pay the rent? With a deep breath, she flicked the latches open. They made a soft, expensive-sounding click-clack. She lifted the lid, and her breath caught in her throat. The suitcase was filled with money, neat, paper-banded stacks of $100 bills, row after row of Benjamin Franklin's face staring up at her. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the top bill. It felt crisp, real. She lifted one stack. The band around it read 10,000. There were 10 stacks, $100,000. The world outside her window, the rain, the sirens, the entire city of New York just faded away. In that moment, there was only her family's crushing poverty, and a suitcase full of what looked like a miracle, or a curse. The silence in the room was a physical thing. It pressed in on Maya, thick and heavy, amplifying the frantic thumping of her own heart. $100,000. The number was so abstract, so impossibly large, that her mind couldn't fully grasp it. She had never even seen $1,000 in one place. This was 100 times that. She carefully closed the lid of the suitcase, the soft thud echoing like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. She slid it under her bed, the worn casters scratching against the dusty floorboards. But out of sight was not out of mind. She could feel its presence radiating through the mattress, a humming, electric energy that made it impossible to think of anything else. She lay in bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her thoughts racing in a chaotic loop. $100,000. That was more than her mother made in 2 years of back-breaking, double-shift work. It was enough to pay their rent for the next 5 years. It was enough to buy Leo's medication for a lifetime. It was enough to send him to a special clinic in Arizona she had read about, a place for children with chronic respiratory illnesses, a place her mother only spoke of in whispers, as if it were a mythical land, like El Dorado. It was the end of the constant, grinding worry that was the background music to their lives. And the man in the Brioni suit. To him, what was this? A rounding error? A careless mistake? He'd tipped her $48 on a $2 coffee without a second thought. This suitcase full of cash might be an inconvenience to him, but to her family, it was the answer to every prayer they had ever uttered. Who would even know? He left it. He was careless. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers, the old playground taunt whispered in her mind. He didn't even see her face. He was too busy, too important. By the time he realized it was gone, he'd be miles away, probably already writing it off as a business loss. A wave of nausea rolled over her. She sat up, pressing her palms against her eyes. This wasn't her. She was Maya Rodriguez. She worked hard. She got good grades. She helped her mother without complaint. She was the one Sal trusted to close up the diner. She was honest. Her mother's words came back to her again. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching, Mija. But people were watching. Leo was watching, in a way. His future was sitting in a leather box under her bed. Her mother was watching, her exhausted face in Maya's mind's eye. Wouldn't this money make her mother's life infinitely better? Wouldn't that be the most loving thing to do? To take this burden from her shoulders? The moral lines blurred. The clear, simple path of right and wrong became a murky, confusing swamp. Keeping the money felt like stealing, but it also felt like saving her family. Returning it felt right, but it also felt like condemning them to more struggle, more sleepless nights, more of Leo's painful coughing fits. The next morning, the world felt different. Every sound was sharper, every interaction freighted with the weight of her secret. At the breakfast table, her mother was poring over a stack of bills, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The electric is going up again," Maria said, more to herself than to Maya. "And Leo's prescription copay, Madre de Dios." Maya's throat tightened. She looked at the worn linoleum, the chipped Formica countertop, the faucet that dripped no matter how hard you turned it. She could fix all of this. With a fraction of what was under her bed, she could wipe away that worried look from her mother's face. I could pick up more shifts," Maya offered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Maria looked up and gave her a tired, loving smile. "No, Mija. You need to study. Your education is our way out. Remember, we do this the right way, the slow way, the honest way." The word honest was a physical blow. Maya felt like a fraud, a hypocrite, sitting in her own kitchen. All day at school, she was distracted. In English class, they were reading The Great Gatsby, a story about the corrosive nature of wealth and the death of the American dream. Her teacher, Mr. Henderson, talked about moral decay, and Maya felt every word was directed at her. In math, she stared at the equations, but the only numbers she could see were 1,000,000. When she got to the diner for her shift, Sal was waiting. "Anything?" he asked, his bushy eyebrows raised. Maya's heart leaped into her throat. "What? The suit? Did he call? About the suitcase?" "Oh, no, nothing," she managed to say, her voice sounding thin and reedy to her own ears. "Huh," Sal grunted. "Weird. Well, if he calls here, I'll send him your way." The thought sent a jolt of pure terror through her. She imagined the man, Harrison Sterling, showing up at her apartment, his cold eyes sweeping over their cramped, humble home. What would he do? Would he call the police? Accuse her of theft? The day dragged on. Every customer who walked in made her jump. Every phone call made her flinch. She was living on a knife's edge of anxiety. The suitcase was no longer a potential miracle. It was a ticking bomb. The freedom it promised was a lie. In its place was a prison of fear and guilt. That night, she couldn't sleep. The temptation was still there, a seductive whisper in the dark, but it was now tangled with the suffocating coils of paranoia. She imagined sirens in the distance were for her. She pictured her face on the news. Teenage waitress steals 100,000. She saw her mother's look of shame, of crushing disappointment. That was the image that broke her. The thought of disappointing her mother, the one person who had sacrificed everything for her and Leo, was more painful than any hardship money could solve. Around 3 a.m. she got out of bed. The apartment was still. She pulled the suitcase out. The rich smell of leather and money filled her small room. She opened it one last time and looked at the stacks of cash. It was a king's ransom, a life-changing sum. But it wasn't her life. It was a life built on a lie, on a moment of weakness. And it would cost her the only thing she truly valued, her self-respect, her mother's respect. With a resolve that settled over her like a heavy blanket, she closed the suitcase. She knew what she had to do. The problem was, she had no idea how to do it. She didn't have his name, his number, or any way to find him. All she knew was that he was a man who wore a Brioni suit and drove a Lincoln Navigator. In a city of 8 million people, it was next to nothing. While Maya wrestled with her conscience in Queens, a different kind of storm was brewing in a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Harrison Sterling was not a man accustomed to making mistakes. His entire empire, Sterling Capital, was built on meticulous calculation, ruthless precision, and the complete absence of error. He hadn't realized the suitcase was missing until he had arrived at a private airfield in Teterboro, New Jersey. The transaction he was there to make was time-sensitive, delicate, and entirely off the books. When he reached for the case in the back of the Navigator and found only empty leather seats, a cold dread, an emotion he hadn't felt in decades, washed over him. He replayed the day in his mind, the tense meeting with his lawyers, the drive, and then the coffee. He had been distracted, on a call with a specialist in Zurich, the conversation so consuming that the world around him had faded to a dull hum. The diner, the rain, the girl who served him. He remembered leaving a tip, he remembered walking out, and he remembered nothing else. By 6 a.m. the next morning, his head of security, a former MI6 agent named Robert Davies, was standing in his office. Davies was a tall, unnervingly calm man with pale eyes that missed nothing. "The diner is called the Golden Spoon in Queens," Davies reported, his voice a clipped British accent. "We've pulled traffic camera footage. You were there for approximately 7 minutes. You left carrying only your phone." "The waitress," Sterling said, his voice tight. "The girl. Did you see her? Hispanic, late teens, dark hair in a ponytail," Davies confirmed. "She retrieved the case from the booth after you left, took it behind the counter. That's the last we see of it on the interior cameras, which are, frankly, archaic." "So she has it," Sterling stated. It wasn't a question. "It's the most probable scenario," Davies agreed. She clocked out at 9 p.m., took the Q47 bus. We're pulling the transit footage now to get a location on her stop." "What's the play?" Sterling demanded, pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below was a glittering tapestry of lights, a kingdom he had conquered, yet he felt utterly powerless. "We can approach this in two ways," Davies said calmly. "Hard or soft. The hard approach involves law enforcement. We report the theft. Given the amount, the NYPD will take it very seriously. They'll find her, obtain a warrant, search her residence. We'll likely recover the funds. However, it will create a public record. Questions will be asked. Why was Harrison Sterling carrying $100,000 in cash in a diner in Queens? It invites scrutiny you've paid me a great deal to avoid." Sterling's jaw tightened. Davies was right. The reason for the cash was the one secret he would protect at any cost. A police report was out of the question. "The soft approach," Davies continued, "is that I pay the girl a visit. I explain the situation. I make it clear that returning the property is in her best interest. People in her position are often intimidated by a firm, official-looking presence. We offer a small reward for her trouble. She returns the case, and the matter is concluded quietly. And if she denies it, if she's already spent it?" A flicker of something cold passed through Davies's eyes. "Then we transition to a more persuasive version of the soft approach. People have pressure points, family, jobs, legal status. We find them and we apply pressure. Quietly." Sterling hated it. He hated this entire mess. It was sloppy, a vulnerability he couldn't afford. "Do it," he commanded. "The soft approach. Find her. Get my property back. And Davies, be discreet." "Of course, sir." Davies was ruthlessly efficient. By noon, he had Maya's name, her address, her school schedule, and her mother's employment details. He knew about her younger brother, Leo, and his recurring hospital visits for acute asthma. To Davies, these were not details of a life. They were a series of potential levers. He decided against a direct confrontation at her home. It was too messy, too unpredictable. The diner was better. It was her place of work, a semi-public space where he could control the encounter. He arrived at the Golden Spoon during the quiet lull of the mid-afternoon. He wore a simple dark suit, but his posture and intense gaze were anything but simple. Maya was refilling salt shakers, her mind a million miles away, trying to figure out how to even begin finding the suitcase's owner. When she saw Davies slide into booth 4, the same booth, a jolt of ice-cold fear shot through her veins. He didn't look like Harrison Sterling, but he had the same aura of power, of a world utterly alien to hers. She walked over, her hands trembling slightly. "Can I help you?" Davies didn't look at the menu. He looked directly at her. His pale eyes were like chips of ice. "Maya Rodriguez. My employer was here yesterday. Mr. Sterling. He left something behind." The name hit her. Sterling, of course. Harrison Sterling, the billionaire CEO of Sterling Capital, the man the news called the Vulture of Wall Street for his habit of buying and gutting struggling companies. The reality of who she was dealing with crashed down on her. He left a suitcase," Maya stammered, her well-rehearsed plan to play dumb crumbling in the face of this man's intimidating presence. "Indeed," Davies said, his voice flat. "A brown leather one. My employer is a very busy man, and he is anxious to have his property returned. He understands it was an inconvenience for you, and he's prepared to offer you $1,000 for your trouble." $1,000. It was a fortune, but it was also an insult compared to the small fortune she had under her bed. The offer itself felt like a test. I have it at home," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how to find him. A simple search for Sterling, New York would have sufficed, Davies said, a hint of condescension in his tone. But no matter. We're here to rectify the situation now. You finish your shift, retrieve the case, and I will meet you at your residence to collect it. He made it sound like an order, not a request. He was treating her like a common thief, a child who had picked up something shiny and had to be told to give it back. A spark of defiance ignited within her. She had been agonizing over doing the right thing, and here was this man all but accusing her of planning the opposite. I'm not comfortable with you coming to my home, Maya said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. And I'm not bringing it on the bus. If he wants it, he can meet me somewhere public. Tomorrow. Davies's eyes narrowed slightly. He hadn't expected resistance. He had expected a scared, compliant teenager. That is not how this is going to work, he said, his voice dropping an octave. You are in possession of property that does not belong to you. The easiest path for you is to return it. Now. I am returning it, Maya shot back, her fear being replaced by a hot flash of anger. But I'm going to do it my way. Tomorrow. I'll meet him at the fountain at Columbus Circle. Noon. If he wants his suitcase, he'll be there. Alone. She had no idea where the words came from. Columbus Circle seemed big, public, safe. The alone part was a desperate attempt to regain some control over a situation that was spiraling away from her. For a long moment, Davies just stared at her. She could see him reassessing her, recalibrating his approach. He had underestimated her. Finally, he gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. I will relay your message. He stood up, placed a $20 bill on the table, and walked out without another word. Maya leaned against the counter, her legs feeling like jelly. She had just stood up to a man who terrified her. She had set the terms. But as the adrenaline faded, a new, chilling thought crept in. She hadn't just arranged to return a suitcase. She had arranged a meeting with one of the most powerful and ruthless men in New York City. And she had just made things very, very complicated. The name Harrison Sterling echoed in Maya's head all night. As soon as she got home, she locked herself in the bathroom, her phone in her trembling hands, and typed his name into the search bar. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Photos of him on the cover of Forbes and Fortune, articles from the Wall Street Journal detailing his latest hostile takeover, blog posts and opinion pieces that painted a portrait of a breathtakingly brilliant but utterly merciless corporate raider. The Vulture of Wall Street. They called him that because he circled dying companies, bought them for pennies on the dollar, and then stripped them for their assets, laying off thousands of employees in the process. One article featured a heart-wrenching interview with a 58-year-old factory worker from Ohio who had lost his job, his pension, and his home after Sterling Capital acquired the plant he had worked at for 40 years. The man's words were filled with a quiet, broken despair. Maya felt sick. The money in the suitcase wasn't just money. It was blood money. It was the distilled misery of countless families just like hers, families whose lives had been dismantled to fuel this man's insatiable greed. Her resolve to return it wavered again, this time for a completely different reason. Before, it was a battle between her need and her conscience. Now it was a battle between her conscience and a different kind of conscience. Did a man like Harrison Sterling deserve to have this money back? Wouldn't it be a form of cosmic justice to take this money, which he had likely obtained by ruining others, and use it for something good? To save a life, even just one. The idea took root. It was no longer just about helping her family. It was about balancing the scales, however slightly, taking from a villain to give to the innocent. It felt biblical. It felt right. She lay awake, her mind a battlefield. On one side was her mother's voice, the simple, unwavering belief in honesty. On the other was the face of the laid-off factory worker, the image of her brother struggling for breath, and the cold, dismissive face of Harrison Sterling himself. The next morning, she was a wreck. She snapped at Leo for playing his game too loud. She barely spoke to her mother. Maria noticed the change immediately. "What is it, Miha?" she asked, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. "You seem a world away." "It's nothing, just tired," Maya lied. "Talk to me," Maria insisted, her eyes soft but perceptive. "Is it about money? Did something happen at the diner?" The dam broke. Maya couldn't hold it in anymore. The secret was too heavy, the moral calculus too complex. Tears welled in her eyes as the whole story came tumbling out. The man, the suitcase, the impossible sum of money, and the discovery of who the man truly was. She left out the part about her meeting with Davies and the arrangement for noon. She was too ashamed. Maria listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When Maya finished, a confession that left her feeling raw and exposed, her mother was silent for a long time. The only sound was the drip of the kitchen faucet. "So you have the money here, in this apartment?" Maria finally asked, her voice quiet and strained. Maya nodded miserably. Maria sighed, a deep, weary sound. She walked over to the window and looked out at the brick wall of the neighboring building. "When your father died," she began, her voice distant, "we had nothing. The hospital bills took everything. I remember having to choose between buying food or buying your diapers. I was so angry, Maya. Angry at the world, at God for being so unfair." She turned back to face her daughter. "There were times I could have taken the easy way. A nurse I worked with used to steal hospital supplies to sell. She told me how to do it. No one would ever know, she said. It would have been so easy. But I thought about you. What kind of a mother would I be if I taught my daughter that our desperation is an excuse to become someone we are not? That our poverty gives us the right to another person's property, no matter who they are? She stepped closer and took Maya's hands in hers. They were rough, calloused hands, but they were the steadiest things in Maya's world. "This man," Maria said, her gaze firm, "he may be a bad man. He may have hurt many people, but his money is not the cure for that. And it is not the cure for us. We will find our own way, the honest way. You will return his suitcase, not because he is a good man, but because you are a good woman. You are my daughter. You are a Rodriguez. We do not steal." The conviction in her mother's voice was absolute. It cut through all of Maya's confused rationalizations and laid the truth bare. Keeping the money wouldn't make her Robin Hood. It would make her a thief. It would make her a person her mother wouldn't recognize. The shame was overwhelming. "I'm supposed to meet him at noon," she whispered, "at Columbus Circle." Maria's eyes widened slightly in alarm, but then her expression softened with pride. "Then you will go, and you will hold your head high. You have nothing to be ashamed of." The journey to Manhattan felt like a dream. Maya carried the suitcase, its weight now feeling less like a burden and more like a penance. She took the subway, the rattling cars filled with the anonymous, striving faces of the city. Each person had their own story, their own struggles. What made hers so different? What gave her the right to break the rules that held their fragile society together? As she emerged from the subway station into the bright, chaotic energy of Columbus Circle, she felt small and insignificant. The towering buildings, the river of yellow cabs, the colossal statue. It was the heart of the world Harrison Sterling inhabited, a world of power and influence. She found a bench near the bubbling fountain and sat down, placing the suitcase next to her. It was 10 minutes to noon. Her hands were sweating, her heart hammered against her ribs. What would he be like? Would he be angry, dismissive? Would he just take the case and walk away? And then she saw him. He wasn't alone. Robert Davies was with him, standing a few feet back, a silent, watchful sentinel. Sterling was not looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the entrance to Central Park, and his face, for the first time, held an expression she couldn't have anticipated. It wasn't anger or impatience. It was a raw, naked anguish, a desperation so profound it seemed to hollow out his sharp features, leaving him looking older, more fragile. This was not the face of the vulture of Wall Street. This was the face of a man in terrible pain. As he finally turned and his eyes met hers, Maya realized that the story she had constructed in her mind, the simple tale of a greedy billionaire and an honest waitress, was about to be torn apart. The truth, she suspected, was far more complicated and far more devastating than she could ever have imagined. Harrison Sterling approached the bench, his long coat billowing slightly in the autumn breeze. Davies remained at a distance, a discreet but unmistakable presence. The sounds of the city, the traffic, the tourists, the distant saxophone player, seemed to fade into a low hum. All Maya could focus on was the man standing before her, the deep-set, haunted look in his eyes. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze dropping to the brown leather suitcase resting by her feet. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "You have it," he said. It wasn't a question, but a statement of profound, weary relief. His voice was gravelly, stripped of the commanding baritone she remembered from the diner. Maya nodded, unable to speak. She had prepared a speech in her head, a few defiant words about his reputation, about why she had hesitated, but looking at the raw pain on his face, the words felt petty and cruel. They died in her throat. "I was going to try and find you," she finally managed, her voice small. "I didn't know how." Sterling gave a slight, dismissive wave of his hand, as if swatting away a triviality. "It doesn't matter. It's here now." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, for the first time. He seemed to take in her worn-out jacket, her scuffed sneakers, the nervous way she clutched the strap of her backpack. "My associate mentioned he offered you a reward." "I don't want a reward," Maya said quickly, the words coming out stronger than she expected. Sterling's brow furrowed. In his world, everyone wanted something. Money, power, access. The idea that this girl, who clearly had so little, would want nothing, was a discordant note in the symphony of human greed he knew so well. "Why?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine curiosity. "Why bring it back? I read the file Davies compiled. I know about your family's situation, your brother. The mention of Leo was a violation. It felt like he had reached into her private life and laid it bare on the public pavement." Her defensiveness flared. "That has nothing to do with this," she said, her chin lifting. "This is your property. It isn't mine. It's that simple." "Is it?" Sterling countered, a flicker of his formidable intensity returning. "Most people in your position, faced with that temptation, they wouldn't find it so simple. They'd rationalize. They'd tell themselves I could afford the loss. They might even say I deserved it." He was echoing her own dark thoughts from the night before. He saw right through her, and it was deeply unsettling. "Maybe I did," she admitted quietly. "I read about you, about the companies, the people who lost their jobs." A shadow crossed Sterling's face. He looked away, back towards the park. The world of finance is not a gentle place. It's a mechanism. It has no sentiment. I didn't create the rules, I just learned to win by them. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. But you're not here to debate my business ethics. You're here to return my property. And I am here to retrieve it. He gestured for Davies, who stepped forward. Maya instinctively pulled the suitcase closer. I said he should come alone, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Sterling held up a hand. He's not here for you. He's here for that. He nodded at the suitcase. I have somewhere I need to be, urgently. Davies reached for the handle, but Maya didn't let go. An idea, reckless and sudden, flashed in her mind. This was her only chance to understand the disconnect between the monster from the headlines and the broken man standing in front of her. Why? She asked, her voice clear and steady. Why was a man like you in a diner in Queens? And why were you carrying this much cash? She looked him directly in the eye. It wasn't for a business deal. You look terrified. This is something else. Davies took a step forward, his expression hardening. That is none of your concern, young lady. Give me the case. Wait, Sterling said, stopping him. He studied Maya for a long, silent moment. She met his gaze without flinching. He seemed to be weighing a decision of immense consequence. The internal struggle was visible on his face. Finally he spoke, his voice so low she had to lean in to hear him over the fountain. You're right. It's not for business. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. It was a gesture of profound stress. My wife, Isabella, she's sick. Very sick. The admission hung in the air between them. It was a crack in his armor, a glimpse of the vulnerable man beneath the titan. The doctors here, at the best hospitals, they've given up, he continued, his voice cracking slightly. They say it's a matter of months. Palliative care, making her comfortable. He spat the words out as if they were poison. I don't accept that. There's an experimental treatment, a clinic in Zurich. It's radical, unapproved by the FDA. Everything has to be done through private channels. No credit cards, no wire transfers that can be traced by insurance companies or medical boards. They require payment in cash. He gestured to the suitcase. This was the deposit to get her on a plane tonight. The truth was so simple and so devastatingly human that it knocked the air out of Maya's lungs. All her judgments, all her self-righteous anger about his business dealings evaporated in an instant. The vulture of Wall Street was not a monster. He was just a man, a husband, terrified of losing the person he loved, willing to break any rule and pay any price to save her. His desperation suddenly mirrored her own family's, her mother, working herself to the bone for a chance at better care for Leo. Him, a billionaire, forced to operate in the shadows for a chance to save his wife. In that moment, the vast chasm between their worlds vanished. They were standing on the same ground, a terrifying landscape of love, fear, and hope. Without a word, Maya stood up and pushed the suitcase into Harrison Sterling's hands. Her fingers brushed against his, and she felt a tremor run through him. I'm so sorry, she whispered. The apology was for so much more than her hesitation. It was for her judgment, for her ignorance, for the pain he was so clearly in. He clutched the suitcase handle, his knuckles white. He looked at her, and the gratitude in his eyes was so immense, so overwhelming, it was almost painful to see. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. My God. Thank you. He turned to leave, then stopped. He looked back at Maya, who was standing alone by the fountain, a teenage girl in a worn-out jacket who had just handed him back his last hope. He seemed to finally understand the magnitude of what she had done, the strength of character it had taken for her, of all people, to return that case. He said something to Davies, his voice low and urgent. Davies nodded, his professional mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal a look of surprise. Then Harrison Sterling walked back to Maya, and this time he wasn't there to retrieve his property. He was there to change her life. "What's his name?" Harrison Sterling asked. His voice was different now. The desperation was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was overlaid with a new, focused intensity. Maya was confused. "Whose name?" "Your brother," he clarified. "The one with the respiratory problems. What's his name?" "Leo," she answered, taken aback. "His name is Leo." Sterling nodded, as if committing the name to memory. "My wife, Isabella. Before she got sick, she sat on the board of the New York Children's Health Fund. She championed a new pulmonary research wing at Mount Sinai. Her name is on the building. She raised millions for it." He paused, his gaze turning inward. It was her passion, helping children who couldn't breathe. The irony was crushing. His wife, who had dedicated her life to helping children like Leo, was now fighting for her own every breath. "Mr. Davies will take my wife to the airfield," Sterling said, making a decision. "I'm making a phone call." He pulled out his phone, the same one from the diner, but now he used it with a purpose that seemed to bend the world around him to his will. He walked a few paces away, his back to Maya, but she could still hear snippets of the one-sided conversation. "Dr. Aris Thorne." "Yes, Harrison Sterling. I don't care what his schedule is. Cancel it. I have an urgent pediatric case. The Isabella Sterling wing. I'm sending a car for the family in 1 hour. Have the chief of pediatric pulmonology meet them in the lobby." "No, not a resident." "The chief. I want your best people on this, Aris. All of them. Bill everything to my family office." He hung up. He turned back to Maya, his expression unreadable. Davies was already moving away with the suitcase, heading towards a black car that had materialized at the curb. "A car will be at your apartment building in an hour," Sterling stated. Not as a request, but as a fact. "It will take you, your mother, and Leo to Mount Sinai. Dr. Thorne is the head of the hospital. He will be waiting. Leo will be admitted and given a full diagnostic workup by the best pediatric pulmonary team on the East Coast. They will not stop until they have a definitive treatment plan for him." Maya was speechless. Her mind was reeling, unable to process the speed at which her world was being rewritten. Mount Sinai, the chief of staff, the best team. These were things from a different universe, fantasies her mother whispered late at night. We can't afford that," she stammered. It was a reflexive, deeply ingrained response. The first barrier to any hope in her life had always been money. Sterling's expression softened. For the first time, he looked at her not as an obstacle or a curiosity, but as an equal. "You will not pay for anything. Not for the car, not for the admission, not for a single doctor, test, or medication. Consider it a debt." "I don't understand," Maya said, her voice shaking. "You returned this," he said, nodding towards the departing car that held the suitcase. "You could have taken it. By every metric of my world, you should have taken it. Your need was greater than my own, or so it would seem. You had every reason to believe I was a man who deserved to lose it. But you didn't. You chose to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You have no idea what you've given me back today, Miss Rodriguez. It's not money. It's time. It's a chance to save the only person who makes my entire life, all this," he gestured vaguely at the opulent city around them, "have any meaning at all. How do I put a price on that? I can't. But I can do this. I can make one phone call and ensure your brother gets the same chance that you just gave my wife." Tears streamed down Maya's face, silent and hot. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible gratitude. "My mother," she began, thinking of her proud, stubborn mother who would never accept charity. "It's not charity," Sterling said firmly, as if reading her mind. "This is a transaction. You showed me an integrity I had frankly stopped believing existed. In return, I am offering you a resource. There is no shame in accepting it. Tell your mother it's the Isabella Sterling Grant for Pediatric Care. It's official as of right now." He gave her a small, sad smile. "Now I have to go. My wife is waiting." He turned and walked towards the waiting car without looking back. Maya stood frozen by the fountain, watching as the black Lincoln Navigator, carrying one of the world's most powerful men, sped away, on a desperate mission to save his wife, his path cleared by the simple, profound honesty of a teenage waitress from Queens. She looked up at the towering skyscrapers, at the indifferent sky. The world was still the same place it had been this morning. It was still unfair, still hard, still divided into the haves and the have-nots. But something fundamental had shifted. A bridge had been built across that divide, forged not of money or power, but of a shared, desperate love for family and a single, extraordinary act of integrity. She had a phone call to make. "Mom," she said, her voice choked with tears when Maria answered. "You need to get Leo ready. A car is coming. We're going to the hospital. Mom, I think everything is going to be okay." The hour that followed was a whirlwind of frantic disbelief. Maya's story, tumbling out in a rush of tears and exhilaration, barely seemed real until the black Cadillac Escalade materialized on their street. The journey across the Queensboro Bridge felt like crossing into another dimension, leaving the world of grit and struggle for the gleaming promise of Manhattan. Leo, caught up in the adventure, stared out the window, for once a child unburdened by his own breath. At Mount Sinai, they were not treated like patients, but like honored guests. They were escorted directly to the Isabella Sterling Wing, a place of serene quiet and calming light that felt more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. There, the chief of pediatric pulmonology, a man with kind eyes and a reassuring smile, knelt to speak with Leo directly. For the first time, Maria Rodriguez was not a worried mother navigating a complex bureaucracy, but a respected partner in her son's care. All questions of payment and insurance were simply non-existent. Leo's case became the sole focus of a world-class medical team. Using advanced diagnostics they'd only ever dreamed of, they quickly uncovered a rare allergic trigger that had been the hidden cause of his most severe attacks. A new, targeted treatment plan was designed, and the results were nothing short of miraculous. Within weeks, the constant, labored wheezing that had been the soundtrack of Leo's childhood began to disappear. He could run, laugh, and play without the looming shadow of an attack. He was being given back his childhood. During this time, a single email arrived in Maya's inbox. It was from a private address, with no subject. The message was brief. "Isabella is responding to the treatment. The doctors are hopeful. Thank you. HS." Two families, once separated by an impossible gulf, were now connected by a parallel thread of hope. The day Leo was discharged, a thick envelope from the Sterling Family Foundation was delivered to Maria. Bracing for some unforeseen bill, Her hands trembled as she opened it. But inside was not a bill. The first document was a letter awarding her a full scholarship, covering tuition, books, and living expenses to complete her nursing degree at Columbia University. The second was the deed to their apartment, now in her name, the mortgage paid in full. Clipped to the deed was a handwritten note from Harrison Sterling. Mrs. Rodriguez, your daughter taught me a lesson in integrity when I needed it most. You raised a remarkable woman. Please accept this as a small token of my family's immeasurable gratitude. A secure home and a secure future are the least we can do. My foundation will oversee your son's care for as long as it is needed. Sincerely, Harrison Sterling Maria wept, finally allowing the immense weight of her years of struggle to be lifted. Their lives were forever altered, not by a lottery win, but by a choice. Years passed. Maria became a registered nurse at Mount Sinai, a respected and compassionate professional. Maya, driven by her experience, earned a scholarship to NYU and studied business ethics, fascinated by the immense power for good or ill that wealth could represent. One crisp autumn afternoon, Maya was sitting outside a cafe in Midtown, now a young consultant for a non-profit. A newspaper headline caught her eye. Harrison Sterling pledges billions to Second Chance, initiative for displaced workers. The article detailed a profound shift in his business philosophy since his wife's recovery, a move towards rebuilding the very kinds of communities his earlier tactics had harmed. As she finished the article, a man stopped by her table. It was Harrison Sterling. He was older, the sharp lines of his face softened, an air of peace having replaced the desperate anguish she remembered. "Maya," he said, a genuine smile reaching his eyes. "I always hoped I would see you again." "Mr. Sterling," she replied, standing to shake his hand. "How is Leo?" he asked immediately. "He's captain of his high school soccer team," Maya said, her heart swelling with pride. "Wonderful," he beamed. "And Isabella sends her love. She still talks about the girl by the fountain who gave us our miracle." They stood for a moment amidst the city's endless hustle, their lives forever intertwined by a single act of honesty. The $100,000 had been the catalyst, but the real fortune was never the cash in the suitcase. It was in the ripples that spread from its return, a boy's laughter, a mother's dream fulfilled, and a powerful man's discovery that the best investments are those made in people. Maya Rodriguez's life was changed not by the $100,000 she found, but by the $100,000 she returned. Her story is a powerful reminder that the choices we make in our darkest moments, when no one is watching, are what truly define us. It's a story about how integrity is a currency more valuable than cash, and how compassion can bridge any divide. A single right decision didn't just save her family, it helped save another, and in doing so, it may have even helped a powerful man rediscover his own humanity. Our world can often feel divided and cynical, but stories like this prove that the capacity for goodness and honor exists in the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder of the power of doing the right thing. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that inspire and explore the incredible depths of the human spirit. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below.